Look, the welfare queen actually showed up. I bet she had to ride the bus through 10 stops just to get here. Kyle sneered, his friends erupting in laughter. 6 years had passed, but for Amani Washington, in her simple dress, she was still the easy target at their Save the School reunion. They invited her to be the punchline, to celebrate their success against the backdrop of the failure they'd written for her. Little did they know, the crumbling school they pretend to care about, the scandals they're desperately trying to hide, and their very futures now rest entirely in the hands of the loser they're mocking. What has she become to hold all their fates in her hands? Join us to discover the answer right here on our channel. Make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss the most satisfying comeback story ever. Have you ever witnessed an underdog completely turn the tables? Share your story in the comments below. The city skyline burned gold against the dusk, its jagged edges softened by the haze of late afternoon. Talia Osei sat at her desk, the glow of her monitor casting faint shadows across her face. The office was a study in minimalism. Clean lines, a single potted plant, and a framed photo that seemed out of place among the sleek surfaces. Her fingers danced over the keyboard, navigating a dashboard of data points, graphs tracking student engagement, learning outcomes, and digital access metrics. Bridgeway Education's logo pulsed subtly in the corner of the screen, a quiet testament to her empire. The numbers told a story of impact, of schools transformed, but Talia's eyes were distant, her thoughts elsewhere. A soft knock broke the rhythm of her typing. Her assistant Lena stepped in, holding a cream-colored envelope. "This came for you," Lena said, her voice tinged with curiosity. "Physical mail. Rare these days." Talia's lips curved slightly, a flicker of amusement. She took the envelope, its weight surprising in her hand. The paper was thick, embossed with the crest of Northwood Preparatory, a private school she hadn't thought of in years. Her thumb brushed the seal, and a memory stirred. Sharp, unbidden. Laughter echoed in polished hallways, the sting of words like "welfare queen" hurled by Kyle Preston, the golden girl who wielded her privilege like a blade. Talia's breath caught, not from pain but from the clarity of it all, the way those moments had carved her resolve. She slit the envelope open with a letter opener, the sound crisp in the quiet room. The invitation unfolded, its text formal yet desperate. Class of 2019 Reunion and Save Northwood Fundraiser. The words urgent and legacy stood out in bold, a plea dressed in nostalgia. Northwood was drowning, debts, declining enrollment, a crumbling facade. Talia's eyes scanned the details, but her mind was elsewhere. Rows of lockers painted too bright, the weight of borrowed books in her arms, the isolation of being the only black student in a sea of white uniforms. She could still hear Kyle's voice, sharp and mocking, telling her she'd never escape her place. The teachers had praised her mind, her code flawless, even on the school's outdated computers. But brilliance didn't shield her from whispers. She'd been invisible, except when they wanted a target. Talia set the invitation down, her fingers lingering on its edge. Another memory surfaced. The day she walked away from Northwood, diploma in hand, rejecting a full-ride scholarship to an Ivy League school. The decision had been reckless, almost foolish, a leap into the unknown to build something of her own. Nights blurred into code, rejections piling up like bricks. Until Bridgeway Education emerged, a platform that brought cutting-edge learning tools to underfunded schools. Now her company was a force, its valuation whispered in boardrooms, but Talia kept her life quiet, her triumphs tucked away from the world's noise. Her computer pinged, pulling her back. An email from a rival edtech firm, their logo sleek but predatory, outlined a proposal to partner, or more likely, to swallow Bridgeway whole. Talia's jaw tightened. The industry was a battlefield, and she was no stranger to fighting for her vision. She closed the email, her focus returning to the invitation. Why had they sent it? Northwood's elite had never wanted her there. Not really. The fundraiser's urgency hinted at desperation, but the reunion felt like a trap, a chance for Kyle and her clique to relive their glory days by tearing her down again. Yet something stirred in Talia. Not anger, but a quiet certainty. They thought they knew her story. They didn't. She reached for the framed photo on her desk, a faded snapshot of a younger self standing at Northwood's iron gates. The girl in the image was thin, her eyes wide with determination, her clothes patched but clean. Talia traced the photo's edge, a smile tugging at her lips. 6 years had passed, each one a step away from that girl. Yet she carried her still. The fire, the resolve, the refusal to bow. The invitation wasn't just a call to return, it was a stage, and Talia knew how to command one. She slipped the envelope into her bag, its weight a promise. Her phone buzzed. A reminder of a board meeting tomorrow, another battle to secure Bridgeway's future. But tonight, her mind was on Northwood, on the past she'd outrun, and the truth she'd carry back. Lena lingered at the door. "You going to that reunion?" she asked, her tone light but probing. Talia's smile deepened, enigmatic. "Maybe," she said, her voice low, steady. "Some invitations demand an answer in person." Lena nodded, sensing the weight behind the words, and left. Talia leaned back in her chair, the city lights stretching out before her. Northwood thought they were summoning a ghost, a girl they could mock one last time. But Talia Osei was no ghost. She was a force, and when she walked through those gates again, every laugh would catch in their throats. She turned off her monitor, the screen fading to black, and stood. The night was hers, and so was the story yet to unfold. The invitation sat heavy in Talia Osei's bag as she stepped out of her car, the gravel crunching under her shoes. Northwood Preparatory loomed ahead, its once grand facade now marred by cracked paint and flickering lamps. The air carried a faint mustiness, as if the school itself was exhaling its decline. Talia adjusted her white dress, its fabric soft but deliberate, a quiet statement of her presence. The banquet hall's chatter spilled through the open doors, a mix of forced laughter and clinking glasses. She paused at the threshold, her breath steady, steeling herself for the faces she hadn't seen in 6 years. Faces that had once turned her brilliance into a punchline. Inside, the hall was a time capsule of privilege. Faded banners boasting championships, chandeliers dimmed by dust. A crowd of former classmates mingled, their voices loud with nostalgia. Talia's entrance drew glances, but none lingered, until Kyle Preston's sharp laugh cut through the noise. "Well, look who crawled out of obscurity." Kyle stood at the center of her clique, her posture commanding attention. Her red dress hugged her frame, its boldness a stark contrast to Talia's understated elegance. "Did you borrow that dress to afford the gas, Talia?" Kyle's words dripped venom, and her group erupted in snickers, their eyes glinting with the old cruelty. Talia met Kyle's gaze, her expression calm, almost serene, as if the barb had glanced off an invisible shield. Jessica Miller lingered at the edge of the group, her fingers twisting the strap of her worn purse. Her eyes darted to Talia, a flicker of unease crossing her face. The others pressed closer to Kyle, eager to bask in her orbit, but Jessica stepped forward, her voice low. "Talia, I'm sorry about that. We were awful." The words stumbled out, clumsy but earnest. Talia tilted her head, her gaze steady but not unkind. "The past is done, Jessica," she said softly. "The future's up to you." Jessica flinched, as if expecting more. But Talia's attention shifted back to Kyle, who was already rallying her audience with another jab. "So, Talia," Kyle said, her smile sharp as she swirled a glass of wine, "what's life like on the fringes? Still scraping by?" The question hung in the air, a dare wrapped in mockery. The crowd's murmurs quieted, sensing a spectacle. Talia's lips curved slightly, a hint of amusement in her eyes. "I work in tech," she said, her tone even, offering nothing more. Kyle's smirk widened, misreading the brevity. "Tech? Oh, that's cute. It's honest work, I suppose. Fixing printers, right?" Laughter rippled again, but it was thinner now, some classmates shifting uncomfortably. Talia didn't flinch, her silence louder than their noise. She moved toward a table, her movements deliberate, as if the room's gravity bent to her will. Whispers followed her, fragments of gossip catching in the air. "Heard Kyle's big startup tanked," one classmate muttered to another, their voices low but not low enough. "All that hype on social media, and now she's just coasting on her dad's name. Talia caught the words, her expression unchanging, but a spark flickered in her mind. Kyle's confidence was a facade, brittle as the school's crumbling walls. She took a seat near the edge of the hall, her bag resting at her feet, the invitation still inside like a talisman. The room buzzed with reunions, but Talia's focus was elsewhere, her thoughts tracing a plan she hadn't yet revealed. Jessica hovered nearby, hesitating before approaching again. "You didn't have to come," she said quietly, almost to herself. "Why did you?" Talia's eyes met hers, a depth there that made Jessica pause. "Some invitations are more than they seem," Talia replied, her voice soft but weighted. Jessica nodded, unsure, and drifted back to the crowd. Kyle, meanwhile, held court at the center of the room, her laughter louder now, as if to drown out the whispers of her failures. But Talia saw the cracks, Kyle's quick glances, the way her hand tightened around her glass. The night was young, and the stage was set for more than nostalgia. Talia leaned back, her fingers brushing the invitation in her bag. She wasn't here to relive the past. She was here to rewrite it. The echoes of Kyle Preston's laughter faded into the hum of the banquet hall, where the clink of glasses and forced cheer filled the air. Talia Osei sat at her table, the invitation still tucked in her bag, its presence a quiet anchor. The chandeliers above cast uneven light, revealing cracks in Northwood Preparatory's once pristine walls. The crowd's nostalgia felt hollow, a veneer over something brittle. Talia's gaze swept the room, catching fleeting glances from classmates who seemed to size her up, their curiosity tinged with the old condescension. She remained still, her hands folded, her calm a stark contrast to the restless energy around her. The principal, Mr. Hargrove, stepped onto the stage, his shoulders slumped under the weight of his words. The microphone squealed briefly, drawing winces before he began. "Northwood is at a crossroads," he said, his voice heavy with resignation. "We face unprecedented debt, outdated facilities, and a sharp decline in enrollment. Without action, our legacy may not survive." The room fell silent, the gravity of his admission cutting through the chatter. Heads turned, some nodding solemnly, others whispering in shock. Talia's expression didn't shift, but her fingers tightened slightly around the edge of her chair, as if grounding herself in the moment. Kyle rose from her seat, her movements sharp and deliberate, seizing the stage as if it were her birthright. As a board member, her presence carried the weight of her family's name. Preston, synonymous with Northwood's history. "This school is more than buildings," she declared, her voice polished but edged with urgency. "It's a legacy, a tradition we all share a duty to protect." Her eyes scanned the crowd, landing on Talia with a pointed jab. "Every contribution matters, even from those who've had less to offer." The words hung like a blade, and a few classmates smirked, their laughter a faint echo of high school cruelties. Talia met Kyle's gaze, her face unreadable, her silence a shield that deflected the barb without effort. But the room wasn't entirely Kyle's. Whispers snaked through the crowd, low but sharp enough to reach Talia's ears. "Did you hear about Kyle's startup?" one classmate muttered, leaning toward another. "All that hype on social media, millions raised, and it crashed in 6 months. She's just riding her dad's coattails now." The speaker, a former football star turned accountant, shook his head. His companion glanced at Kyle, whose smile faltered for a split second, betraying a crack in her armor. Talia caught the moment, her mind cataloging it like a line of code. Kyle's confidence was a facade, as fragile as the school's crumbling foundation. The principal stepped forward again, his hands clasped tightly. "We've launched the Save Northwood campaign," he said, gesturing to a projector screen flickering to life. It displayed a graph of red lines plunging downward. Debt, enrollment, hope. "We need your support to preserve what makes this place special." The plea felt rehearsed, almost desperate, and the crowd's response was tepid, a scattering of polite claps. Kyle raised her glass, rallying the room with a toast to tradition, but her voice carried a strain, as if she sensed the tide shifting. Talia's eyes flicked to the screen, noting the numbers, her mind already calculating possibilities the others couldn't see. A classmate at a nearby table leaned closer to his friend, his voice barely above a whisper. Kyle's acting like she owns this place, but I heard the boards panicking. They're hiding something. Talia's lips twitched, not quite a smile, as she absorbed the gossip. Northwood's decay wasn't just physical, it was structural, rooted in mismanagement and secrets. She thought of the invitation in her bag, its call for a fundraiser, no accident. They needed money, yes, but they also needed her ignorance, her absence. They didn't know she'd already rewritten the rules. Talia shifted in her seat, her posture relaxed but deliberate. She hadn't come to gloat or to settle scores. She'd come for something bigger, something Northwood's elite couldn't fathom. Kyle's speech wound down, her words ringing hollow against the reality of the school's plight. The crowd applauded, but the sound was thin, fractured. Talia's gaze drifted to the exit, where the hallway led to the old computer lab, a place where she'd once found refuge, coding late into the night under Mr. Whitaker's quiet encouragement. That memory steadied her, a reminder of why she was here. The night was far from over, and the stage was set for truths to unravel. The banquet hall's tension lingered like static as Talia Osei slipped away from the crowd, the principal's dire warnings and Kyle Preston's hollow speech fading behind her. The corridor to the old computer lab was dim, its linoleum scuffed and curling at the edges, a silent testament to Northwood's decline. Talia's footsteps echoed, steady and purposeful, as she moved toward a place that had once been her sanctuary. The invitation in her bag felt heavier now, its promise of a fundraiser laced with an undercurrent she couldn't ignore. She wasn't here for nostalgia, she was here to shift the ground beneath their feet. The computer lab's door creaked as she pushed it open, revealing a room frozen in time. Rows of outdated machines hummed faintly, their screens casting a sickly glow. Mr. James Whitaker stood at the far end, wiping dust from a monitor with a rag, his movements slow but deliberate. He looked up, his face breaking into a warm smile. "Talia," he said, his voice soft but bright, like a spark in the dimness. "You made it." She nodded, stepping closer, her gaze sweeping the room. Memories flooded back. Late nights hunched over these same computers, her fingers flying across keys, coding solutions to problems no one else saw. Mr. Whitaker had been there, offering quiet encouragement, slipping her extra lab time when the school's rules barred her from staying late. "You haven't changed this place much," Talia said, her tone light but tinged with something deeper. Mr. Whitaker chuckled, setting the rag down. "Budget's tight. These relics are all we've got." He paused, his eyes searching hers. "But you've gone far, haven't you?" Talia's lips curved, not quite a smile, but enough to hint at truths unspoken. He gestured to a chair, and they sat, the hum of the machines filling the silence. "Heard something interesting last week," he said, leaning forward. "Some ed tech company offered to upgrade our systems, free of charge. Catch is, a former student is overseeing the project. Board's buzzing about it, but they don't know who." His eyes twinkled, as if he suspected more than he let on. Talia's expression remained steady, her hands folded in her lap. "Sounds like a game changer," she said, her voice even, betraying nothing. Mr. Whitaker nodded, his gaze lingering. "You always had a spark, Talia. Knew you'd do something big." The words hit her quietly, a reminder of the belief that had carried her through Northwood's darkest days. She thought of the invitation, the fundraiser's desperation, and the rival firms circling her company like a vulture. This wasn't just about saving a school, it was about rewriting what it could mean. Outside, a sharp voice cut through the quiet. "They can't take Northwood from us." Kyle's words, heated and frantic, spilled from a nearby stairwell where she paced, phone pressed to her ear. "A buyout? From some nobody company? Dad, we'll lose everything." Her voice cracked, raw with panic, and Talia's ears caught every syllable. The board's secrets, hinted at in the banquet hall, were unraveling. Kyle's family had built Northwood's legacy, but now it teetered, and she was scrambling to hold it together. Talia's gaze flicked to Mr. Whitaker, who hadn't heard, his focus on a tangled cord he was unknotting. She stood, her movements smooth, her mind already piecing together the next move. As she stepped toward the door, a classmate passed in the hallway, his voice low but clear. Talia always talked about fixing education, he muttered to his companion, their footsteps fading toward the banquet hall. The words hung in the air, a thread connecting her past to the present. Talia paused, her hand on the doorframe, the hum of the computers behind her like a heartbeat. Kyle's panic, the board's secrecy, Mr. Whitaker's faith, they were all pieces of a puzzle she'd been assembling for years. She wasn't just a guest at this reunion. She was a force, and the ground was shifting faster than they knew. Talia returned to the hall, the noise swelling as she approached. The crowd's chatter was louder now, laced with unease about the school's fate. Kyle stood near the stage, her phone call ended, her posture rigid as she scanned the room for allies. Talia's eyes met hers for a moment, a silent challenge, before she slipped back into her seat. The invitation in her bag was no longer just a call to return. It was a lever, and she was ready to pull it. The night was building towards something inevitable, and Talia was its architect. The murmur of the banquet hall swelled as Talia Osei slipped back into her seat, the echo of Kyle Preston's frantic phone call still ringing in her ears. The air was thick with unease, the crowd's earlier nostalgia fraying under the weight of Northwood Preparatory's looming collapse. The chandeliers flickered, casting jagged shadows across the worn tables, as classmates traded glances, their whispered speculations growing bolder. Talia's hand rested lightly on her bag, the invitation inside a silent reminder of why she was here. Kyle stood near the stage, her posture stiff, trying to reclaim the room's attention with a forced smile. But the energy had shifted, and Talia felt it, like a current pulling toward an inevitable break. The principal, Mr. Hargrove, returned to the microphone, his hands trembling as he clutched a folded piece of paper. The crowd hushed, sensing a shift. "I have an urgent announcement," he said, his voice cracking slightly. "We've received an extraordinary proposal that could change Northwood's future." He unfolded the paper, his eyes scanning it as if to confirm its reality. Bridgeway Education, a leading edtech company, has offered to purchase Northwood Preparatory. They will clear our debts, invest $50 million in modernizing our facilities, and establish a $20 million scholarship fund for low-income students. A gasp rippled through the room, sharp and electric. Heads turned, hands reached for phones, fingers tapping screens to search for Bridgeway Education. Whispers erupted. 50 million? Who are they? Scholarships? That's unheard of here. Talia remained still, her gaze fixed on the principal, her expression as calm as a lake before a storm. She caught a classmate's muttered awe. Bridgeway's huge. Revolutionize digital learning for underfunded schools. Another voice, softer, came from a woman who'd once shared a study group with Talia. She was always talking about education access. Could it be? The question hung, unanswered, as eyes darted toward Talia, then away, uncertain. Kyle's face drained of color. She stepped forward, her voice cutting through the buzz. "This is a hostile takeover," she snapped, her hands clenched at her sides. "Some faceless company thinks they can buy our legacy? We won't let Northwood be sold off like a cheap asset." Her words were fierce, but her voice wavered, betraying the panic Talia had overheard in the stairwell. The crowd's reaction was mixed. Some nodded in support, loyal to the Preston name, while others exchanged skeptical looks, their faith in Kyle shaken by rumors of her failed ventures. Talia's lips twitched, a flicker of amusement, but she stayed silent, her fingers tracing the rim of her water glass, her calm a stark contrast to Kyle's unraveling. The principal raised a hand, trying to quell the rising chatter. "This offer is unprecedented," he said, his tone pleading for unity. "The board is reviewing it, but we must act swiftly. Northwood's survival depends on it." He stepped back, looking lost as the projector screen behind him flickered with the same grim financial charts from earlier, now overshadowed by the weight of Bridgeway's proposal. A man in the back, once a debate team rival of Talia's, leaned toward his friend. "Kyle's family's been bleeding the school dry. Bet they're scared this'll expose them." The words were a quiet knife, slicing through the room's fragile decorum. Talia's gaze drifted to Kyle, who was now whispering urgently to a fellow board member, her gestures sharp and desperate. The crowd's phones lit up, screens glowing with articles about Bridgeway's meteoric rise. its platforms empowering schools and underserved communities. Its founder, a shadowy figure rarely seen in public. Talia felt the weight of their curiosity, their questions circling closer to the truth. She didn't move, didn't speak, but her presence seemed to draw the room's focus, like a star pulling planets into orbit. A woman nearby, her voice barely audible, murmured, "Talia was never one to follow their rules." The comment landed like a spark, unnoticed by most, but igniting something in the air. Kyle's eyes met Talia's for a fleeting moment, a challenge laced with fear. Talia held her gaze, unflinching, her silence louder than any retort. The room's energy pulsed, the crowd caught between hope for Northwood's salvation and suspicion of its old guard. Talia's hand slid to her bag, brushing the invitation's edge. She wasn't here to watch the school crumble. She was here to rebuild it, and the pieces were falling into place. The night was tilting toward a revelation, and Talia was ready to step into its center. The banquet hall thrummed with restless energy, the weight of Bridgeway Education's offer hanging like a storm cloud over Northwood Preparatory. Talia Osei sat poised at her table, her fingers still on the rim of her water glass. The invitation in her bag a silent pulse of intent. The crowd's whispers had grown sharper, their phones still glowing with articles about Bridgeway's rise, each search tightening the noose around the school's old guard. Kyle Preston stood near the stage, her forced smile fraying as she scanned the room for allies, her earlier bravado now a thin veil over panic. Talia watched her, her gaze steady, a quiet force that seemed to pull the room's gravity toward her. Jessica Miller lingered at the edge of the crowd, her hands twisting the strap of her purse, her eyes darting between Kyle and the murmuring classmates. The principal's announcement had cracked something open, and the air buzzed with questions no one dared ask aloud. Jessica slipped into a quieter corner, drawn by the sound of Kyle's voice, low and frantic, coming from behind a velvet curtain. "They know about the misappropriated funds, Dad," Kyle hissed into her phone, her words sharp with desperation. "If this buyout happens, we're finished. Our name, the board, everything." Her voice trembled, a raw edge that betrayed the truth Talia had glimpsed in the stairwell. Jessica froze, her breath catching as the words sank in. Kyle wasn't fighting for Northwood's legacy. She was fighting for her own survival. Jessica stepped forward, her voice shaking but firm. "Kyle, what did you do?" Kyle spun around, her eyes wide, caught off guard. "Jessica, this isn't your business," she snapped, but her tone was brittle, her hands trembling as she shoved her phone into her pocket. Jessica didn't back down, her guilt from years of following Kyle's lead now fueling her resolve. "It is my business," she said, her voice rising. "You've been lying to everyone, hiding money problems, pretending you're saving the school. What else are you hiding?" Kyle's face twisted, a mix of fear and fury. "Keep your voice down," she hissed, stepping closer, her words laced with a desperate plea. "Stick with me, Jess. We can still come out on top. Board positions, influence. Don't throw it away." Across the hall, Talia caught the faint edge of their argument, her eyes locking with Jessica's for a fleeting moment. The look was brief but piercing, as if Talia could see the battle raging in Jessica's mind. Jessica faltered, her resolve wavering under Talia's unyielding gaze, a silent reminder of the apology she'd offered earlier and the choice she now faced. Talia's expression didn't shift, but her presence was a quiet command, pulling Jessica toward a truth she couldn't ignore. The crowd's chatter grew louder, oblivious to the confrontation, but a few classmates nearby picked up on the tension. One, a former editor of the school paper, leaned toward his friend, his voice low. "Talia was always different. She saw things we didn't. Bet she knows more than she's letting on." Kyle stepped back, her composure cracking further as she tried to salvage control. "You don't understand, Jess," she said, her voice dropping to a desperate whisper. "If Bridgeway takes over, they'll dig up everything. We'll lose it all." Jessica shook her head, her eyes narrowing. "You mean you'll lose it all," she said, the words cutting through Kyle's facade. The accusation hung between them, a fracture in their old alliance. Kyle's gaze darted to the crowd, searching for an escape. But the room was closing in, the whispers of her failed ventures and the board's secrets weaving a tighter net. Talia leaned back in her chair, her fingers brushing the invitation in her bag. The pieces were falling into place. Kyle's panic, the board's desperation, the crowd's growing doubt. She hadn't spoken a word since the principal's announcement, but her silence was a weapon, sharpening the room's unease. The classmates' whisper echoed in her mind. Talia saw things we didn't. She had, even back then, coding solutions in the dim computer lab, while others mocked her dreams. Now those dreams were a force, and Northwood was about to feel their weight. The hall's energy pulsed, the crowd caught between hope for salvation and suspicion of the Preston's reign. Talia's gaze drifted to the stage, where the principal stood, his hands clasped, awaiting the board's decision. She knew what was coming, and she was ready to shape it. The banquet hall crackled with tension, the air thick with the fallout of Jessica's confrontation and Kyle Preston's faltering grip on control. Talia Osei sat at her table, her water glass untouched, the invitation in her bag a silent pulse of purpose. The crowd's whispers had sharpened into a restless hum, phones still aglow with searches about Bridgeway education, each article tightening the knot around Northwood Preparatory's crumbling legacy. Kyle stood near the stage, her hands clenched, her earlier bravado reduced to a brittle mask. Talia's gaze was steady, a quiet force that seemed to draw the room's focus, as if the very walls leaned in to hear what came next. The principal, Mr. Hargrove, returned to the microphone, his face etched with exhaustion but a flicker of resolve. "The board has made its decision," he announced, his voice cutting through the chatter. "Faced with mounting debts and no viable alternative, we've voted to accept Bridgeway Education's offer." A murmur rippled through the crowd, equal parts shock and curiosity. Kyle stepped forward, her voice sharp with defiance. "This is a publicity stunt," she snapped, her words slicing the air. "Some nobody company thinks they can erase our legacy with a check? We won't let Northwood be stolen." Her accusation rang out, but it was brittle. The crowd's response muted, their faith in her shaken by whispers of scandal and failure. Talia's lips curved, a faint spark of amusement in her eyes. She leaned forward, her voice low but piercing, cutting through Kyle's tirade. "If Bridgeway's so insignificant, Kyle, why are you terrified?" The room froze, every head turning toward Talia. Kyle's face drained of color, her mouth opening, but no words coming out. The question hung like a blade, exposing the cracks in her facade. Classmates exchanged glances, some leaning forward, others tapping their screens, searching for answers. Talia's calm was a weapon, sharpening the room's unease, her presence commanding without effort. Mr. Hargrove cleared his throat, his hands trembling slightly as he gripped the podium. "We're honored to welcome the visionary behind Northwood's future," he said, his voice steadier now. "Please join me in introducing the founder and CEO of Bridgeway Education." The crowd turned, expecting a stranger to stride through the doors, some corporate figure in a tailored suit. But no one entered. Instead, Talia set her water glass down with a soft clink, the sound slicing through the silence. She rose, her white dress catching the stage's dim light, and stepped forward, her movements deliberate, unhurried. Gasps punctuated the air as realization dawned. Kyle staggered back, her face ashen, her hands gripping the edge of the stage for support. Talia ascended the steps, her presence filling the space like a tide. She took the microphone, her voice calm but resonant, each word measured. "I'm Talia Osei," she said, her gaze sweeping the room, "founder and CEO of Bridgeway Education." The crowd erupted in whispers, phones lighting up with frantic searches. Articles flashed across screens. "Bridgeway Education revolutionizes learning in underserved communities. Billion-dollar startup reshapes edtech." A classmate's voice broke through, stunned. "She was the one coding in the lab all those years." Another whispered, "She said she'd change education," and we laughed. The room's energy shifted, awe and disbelief colliding, as Kyle stood frozen, her world unraveling. Talia's eyes met Kyle's for a fleeting moment, not with triumph, but with clarity, as if seeing through her to the truth beneath. "6 years ago, I walked these halls," she said, her voice steady, "and some of you decided I didn't belong. But those moments, the taunts, the isolation, taught me what Northwood could be. not what it was. The crowd was silent, hanging on her words. Bridgeway's offer isn't just about money, it's about opportunity for every student who's ever felt invisible. Her words landed like stones, each one reshaping the room's understanding. Kyle's hands trembled, her legacy reduced to rubble in the face of Talia's quiet power. The principal stepped forward, his expression a mix of gratitude and disbelief. Ms. Osei's vision will ensure Northwood's survival, he said, his voice cracking with emotion. The crowd began to clap, hesitant at first, then swelling into applause, a tide of recognition. Jessica, standing at the edge, watched with wide eyes, her earlier guilt now mingled with awe. Kyle remained rooted, alone, her defiance extinguished. Talia stepped back from the microphone, her gaze drifting to the hall's faded banners. She wasn't here to claim victory, she was here to build something new, and the stage was hers. The banquet hall was a sea of stunned silence, the weight of Talia Osei's revelation still rippling through the crowd. The microphone hummed faintly in her hand, her words as CEO of Bridgeway Education echoing in the minds of her former classmates. Kyle Preston stood frozen at the edge of the stage, her hands limp, the last vestiges of her defiance crumbling like Northwood's faded walls. Phones glowed in the audience, screens flashing with headlines about Talia's billion-dollar empire, each article a nail in the coffin of the old hierarchy. Talia's gaze swept the room, calm and resolute, not seeking vengeance, but something far greater. The invitation in her bag, once a taunt, was now a fulcrum, and she was ready to turn the world on it. She stepped closer to the microphone, her voice clear, unwavering, cutting through the hush. 6 years ago, I walked these halls as the girl you called a loser, told I'd never escape my circumstances, she began, her words deliberate, each one landing like a stone in still water. But those moments, the taunts, the isolation, showed me what Northwood could be, not what it was. The crowd leaned in, some with awe, others with shame, their eyes fixed on the woman who had rewritten their story. Kyle's face was a mask of disbelief, her legacy reduced to dust in the face of Talia's quiet power. Jessica Miller, at the edge of the crowd, clutched her purse, her eyes bright with something new. Hope, perhaps, or redemption. Bridgeway's mission isn't about erasing Northwood, Talia continued, her tone steady but infused with vision. It's about building a future where every student, no matter their background, has the tools to thrive. She paused, letting the words settle. Our investment will modernize this school. New labs, digital platforms, resources for those who need them most. But more than that, we're establishing the James Whitaker Scholarship, a $20 million fund to ensure no student feels invisible. The crowd gasped, a soft wave of sound, as eyes turned to Mr. Whitaker, who stood near the stage, his expression caught between pride and disbelief. Talia stepped away from the podium, her movements unhurried, and approached Mr. Whitaker. From her bag, she produced a sleek laptop, its surface gleaming under the hall's dim lights. "This is what I needed back then," she said, her voice soft but resonant as she handed it to him. "A tool to build dreams, not just borrow them." Mr. Whitaker's hands trembled as he took it, his eyes glistening. He pulled her into a brief embrace, his voice choked. "You did it, Talia," he whispered. The crowd's applause swelled, no longer hesitant but fervent, a tide of recognition for the girl they'd overlooked and the woman she'd become. Jessica stepped forward, her voice barely audible over the clapping. "Thank you," she said, her words simple but heavy with meaning. Talia met her gaze, nodding slightly, a silent acknowledgement of the choice Jessica had made in confronting Kyle. Kyle, meanwhile, stood alone, her shoulders slumped, the weight of her family's secrets and her own failures pinning her in place. The crowd's eyes no longer sought her. They were on Talia, on the future she was carving. The principal, Mr. Hargrove, joined Talia on stage, his voice thick with gratitude. "Ms. Osei's vision will ensure Northwood's survival," he said, "and make it a beacon for generations to come." Talia stepped back, her role as architect complete. She moved toward the hall's exit, pausing at the threshold to glance back. The banners overhead, once symbols of a rigid past, seemed smaller now, overshadowed by the promise of what was to come. Outside, the night air was cool, the campus quiet except for the hum of a new beginning. Talia walked to the courtyard, where a group of current students, diverse, eager, unaware of the night's drama, tested digital tablets, their screens glowing with Bridgeway's learning tools. Their laughter, unburdened by the old hierarchies, was a sound Talia had built her empire to hear. She stood for a moment, watching them, her bag light now, the invitation's weight lifted. Northwood wasn't her victory, it was her foundation, a place where she'd turned pain into purpose. She turned away, her steps steady, not toward triumph but toward the next challenge. The school behind her was no longer a relic of exclusion. It was a canvas for opportunity, and Talia Osei was its creator. Thank you for following Talia Osei's powerful journey in Arrogant Classmates. Invite the girl they once called a loser. After 6 years, unaware she's now a... Her rise from outcast to visionary is meant to spark reflection. What moved you most about her triumph? Did Kyle's unraveling or Jessica's awakening strike a chord? Share your thoughts. We're eager to hear them. With gratitude for joining us, we can't wait to share another story with you soon.